Hello. Okay. Welcome to my TV review of Star Wars The Acolyte Season 1. And I want to start this review off by saying I've enjoyed pretty much everything Star Wars related before the Disney takeover and after the Disney takeover to a certain degree. There have been movies and TV shows that I've loved, that I've adored, but there's also been movies and TV shows that I've just sort of enjoyed, and there's been aspects that I've really liked about them, but I've also had issues, but nothing where I can really say I've absolutely hated, apart from one movie, and that was The Rise of Skywalker. I absolutely hated The Rise of Skywalker, and that's another video for another time. But pretty much everything else when it comes to Star Wars, before the Disney takeover and after the Disney takeover, I've pretty much enjoyed or loved. And then we've got The Acolyte. The Acolyte Season 1, and I'll be honest with you right away, this show was a massive misfire. So, if you've watched my previous video where I did my initial reactions to the show, to the very first 2 episodes of The Acolyte, it was somewhat mixed. It was very average. Like, I kind of liked what they were trying to do with the story and how they were sort of delving a little bit deeper into the Jedi and sort of give them this kind of like, you know, the Jedi perhaps are not all as high and mighty and flawless as they appear to be, and they've got flaws, and I kind of really like that direction, and I really think they did a good job at sort of taking me back to being a kid again watching the prequels. I think when it comes to the aesthetic of the show, the set design, just the look, the feel, and even the sound design, it did a really good job at capturing the essence of the prequels, and you've got a bit of a blend of the original trilogy in here as well, and I really dug the fact that we've got actors on actual sets in real locations, and they sort of really try to sort of film as much as possible on actual sets and not so much on the volume stage, which I really appreciated. You know, I'm a massive fan of practical effects, and I'm a big fan of just film and TV in general being shot actually on location, especially when it falls within the genre of science fiction and fantasy, because I just feel like it grounds the story more and adds a bit more authenticity to the actual story and film. And so I love the fact that we've got our characters, our actors in real locations. It just adds so much more groundedness for me. It just feels a little bit more tangible, and I like that, and so I really like that approach. And so this is not going to be a review of me just completely bashing Season 1 of The Acolyte. There are aspects that I really liked, and I think I want to touch on them first. Like I've already just touched on, from sort of a technical perspective, when it comes to sort of the practical effects, the special effects, the CGI is pretty good here. There's some beautiful moments in space. You've got this kind of chase through like an asteroid field or an asteroid belt, and visually it was stunning, along with the sound design. I was really in those moments of action, and especially the fight scenes, I was enjoying myself, and it was quite immersive within those moments due to how those moments were brought to life. The fight scenes in this show are incredible. Like, they are some of the best lightsaber duels and lightsaber fights that I've seen in Star Wars. I wouldn't say for me personally it's the best, but there is this one moment in particular that was like, yeah, fuck yeah, it was brilliant. The fight that I'm referring to is from episode 5, titled Night, and is when we've got our Sith Lord attacking the Jedi, and it's probably my favourite episode. It's one of the strongest episodes, but it's funny that I say that because it's one of those episodes where really the story doesn't really continue that much, and it's still an episode that I've got issues with, but for me it's the one that I really enjoy the most. And when it comes to the choreography, I think personally it's some of the strongest choreography that we've seen in anything Star Wars when it comes to the TV side of things. And the fight itself, this particular fight, it's got a lot of energy behind it, and it's within that moment you do feel the threat, you feel the danger of this Sith, just in how he comes to life within this fighting style. Like, you could feel the danger, and it's in those moments that I was quite immersed. And not only that, when we find out who this Sith Lord is, played by Amani Sahinto, I think that's how you pronounce his name, I feel like he really did a good job, and he did his best at sort of really bringing this character to life. I was intrigued by this character down to Manny's performance. The writing doesn't help, and I feel like with every other actor and actress within this show, they all did their best with the writing. And this is going to sort of take me into my negatives now. I may as well sort of just jump straight into the negatives here. The writing in this show and just how this story is structured was terrible. Like, and I got hints of it in the first 2 episodes. Like, if you've watched my initial reaction to those first 2 episodes, I kind of picked up on sort of gaps in logic when it came to the story, and sort of like when it came to characters getting from point A to point B to point C, it sometimes felt like a character would go from point A, miss B and C, and just land at D. And that's the best way I can explain it. And sort of those issues I had with the first 2 episodes, they really become a hell of a lot more evident as the show goes on, because you've got these massive sort of gaps in logic when it just comes to the sort of the structure of the story. You've got characters that make decisions that don't make sense, that haven't got any weight behind them, and a lot of that is just down to the fact that we are missing so much character development. Like, I couldn't give a fuck about any character within this TV show, other than, I suppose, that I kind of was intrigued by Manny as our Sith Lord, and even Saul, who's played by a Lee Jung-jae, I think that's how you pronounce his name. But I really liked him and what he was doing with the character. But even he became incredibly annoying as the season progressed. And it was frustrating because I don't think it was him and the performance. It was, for me, the writing and what was happening with the story and how the story was unraveling. Nothing had any weight behind it. Nothing made sense. And it was how it all sort of came together. I tell you something, I think one of the major problems with this show, and every other TV show I've kind of had it to a certain degree. It's worked better for others. The Mandalorian, for example, it's worked quite well with, and I'd even say Andor. But I do think the length of these episodes are really affecting how these stories are told. Like, I was watching The Acolyte at the same time I was watching Season 1 of The House of Dragon. My first time watching it, I do intend to do a review for that as well. But there was such a massive contrast in quality from watching The House of Dragon Season 1 to The Acolyte Season 1. And where you've got The House of Dragon, where you've got 1 hour long episodes, where you've got characters that are fleshed out, you get to understand these characters and what makes them tick. And all of this just sort of really kind of boils down to basics when it comes to writing and sort of how you develop your characters and sort of how you get your viewers on board with these characters' journeys. There was just so much missing. There was just so much development and meat missing that maybe this story might have worked if it had been done, if it had been written in a way that really allowed us to get behind these characters. But for me personally, I think it's between the writing and just the length of these episodes that really affected this show. Like, one of my favourite characters, especially within the first, say, half of this season, was Saul. But then when it comes to sort of his motivations, and as we find out a little bit more about this character, I just found myself really not caring, because, like I said, you've got these characters that go from A, miss B and C, and land at D, and nothing made sense. And just sort of what it was they desired, especially the character of Saul, it just really, really didn't work. And it's the same with the witches. I think what they were trying to do with the witches, I think, could have worked if it had been handled better. But at the same time, when it comes to the witches and how they play into the Star Wars lore and sort of how it sort of connects to a very kind of pivotal aspect to the character of Palpatine and Anakin, I think it should have been handled with a hell of a lot more care than what it was handled with. Like, look, you know, I don't want to come across as this big crybaby fanboy. I'm a massive fan of Star Wars. I always have been. It's one of those, one of the first movies that I was ever introduced to and sort of helped give birth to my love of film. So there will always be that kind of big emotional attachment to Star Wars. And I'm all for different people trying different things and exploring different aspects of the Star Wars universe. I just think when it comes to the writing and the creative process with this show, The Acolyte, it was just a massive misfire, and I feel like they really need to take more time, especially if they're going to sort of tackle certain storylines that do connect to that kind of bigger sort of overall story. When it comes to the Skywalker saga, for example, this does hint at potentially leading into the rise of Palpatine, and I don't mind that. But I feel like you really need to be careful when handling that material or sort of handling with that aspect of the story. To be honest with me, for me personally, I don't know why they just didn't adapt Darth Plagueis. But if we are going to take on a story within the Star Wars universe that does kind of affect or lead into what's already been established, I think you need to hire writers and a creative team that truly understand Star Wars and what Star Wars means. And I've never really said that about Star Wars before, because like I said, I really am all for different creators and different artists coming in and adding their own stamp. But at the same time, it still has to feel like Star Wars. And I feel like this is the first time I have watched anything Star Wars, and I have felt, especially as a season as a whole, I have felt this just wasn't Star Wars. So yeah, the entire season feels rushed and just crammed full of nonsense with some, when it comes to a technical perspective, there were elements that I really liked. Like I said, the effects were pretty good. Some of the action and the fight scenes were really, really strong. And in those moments, I was immersed. But it also was very frustrating down to the fact that when it came to the story of these characters and their journeys, none of it had any weight. So ultimately, it all just ended up becoming noise, really. Which is a real shame. Because when it comes to a technical perspective in bringing these worlds to life, it was nice to see actors actually on real locations and practical effects being used as much as possible. That aspect of the show I really liked. I just feel like they were trying to do an awful lot maybe in sort of such a small amount of time. The length of these episodes are not working for these type of stories, especially this type of story that they were trying to tell, which was something a little bit more darker and complex, and perhaps a little bit more adult when it comes to exploring sort of the flaws of sort of the Jedi and that kind of institution, and when you've got the politics, sort of getting involved with all of that. That is all kind of intriguing, but sort of it also just doesn't quite come together due to the writing. And perhaps it just all needed to be a little bit more focused and maybe less concerned about getting ready for season 2. Because I'll be very honest with you, after season 1 of The Acolyte, I really don't want, or I'm not really interested in a season 2. Especially knowing where I feel like they're potentially going to go and how this is going to tie into Darth Plagueis and Palpatine. I would rather they don't. Enough rambling on from me. This was a massive disappointment, and when it comes to Star Wars within TV, this has probably been the first time where I can really say that I absolutely hated this show, this bit of Star Wars material. Which it pains me to say, because like I said, I've got this big, deep emotional attachment to Star Wars, and when it comes to the TV shows, I've loved and I've enjoyed them. I mean, Obi-Wan, for example, for me personally, Obi-Wan is one of the weakest. But yet there was a lot that I liked about Obi-Wan that sort of really kind of stopped me from, not being immersed. That has stopped me from hating it. When it comes to The Acolyte, I just really did not have a good time. I really just didn't enjoy it. Yes, I appreciated aspects about it from a technical perspective, but just as a show as a whole, when it comes to sort of our characters and their journeys, it just did nothing for me, and it just ended up lacking any weight or depth, which is quite funny because with what they were attempting to do with this show, to make it this kind of deeper, more complex, darker story, they kind of play around with it, they hint at it, but it just doesn't all come together. So yeah, I am really rambling on now. You can see I'm quite sort of frustrated with this show, but yeah, there are my thoughts on Season 1 of The Acolyte, and I will be giving Season 1 of The Acolyte a 2 out of 10. So yeah, they are my thoughts on The Acolyte Season 1, but what did you guys think? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you agree or disagree with anything I've said? And please let me know in the comments below, and let's get a discussion going. And if you've made it this far into the video, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And if you want to watch future movie and TV reviews from just some random Welsh geek rambling on, then please don't forget to hit the subscribe button. It will mean an awful lot to me. And also a big thank you to all those that have recently subscribed to my channel. It means an awful lot. I'm hoping to hit 500 by the end of the year. I still can't believe that I got the subscribers that I've got who want to follow just some random Welsh geek rambling on. It really does mean an awful lot to me, and I do really enjoy doing this and sharing with you all my thoughts on everything film, TV, and yeah, I really do love it. So yeah, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it, and I'll be catching you guys soon.